Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. Danny Katz is here. We wanted this to be word salad, but the strike guards at YouTube say one more day for me. So it's a regular numbered episode, therefore just for our supporters. Words number 74. Danny, my friend, how are you?
I am.
You are, as am I. So this is what we're going to do. I think we're going to still do the show in two parts. Maybe one will go out, and then a little later, the second part will go out. And I think we're going to talk about RFK Jr. mostly in the first hour. Maybe we'll do the little part about dark journalists because I think he's interviewed RFK Jr. He's one of the many. Yes. He's one of the many who've interviewed him. So maybe we'll include that at the end of this hour, the thing about dark journalists that I had brought up last time. Well, I don't know if I brought it up on the show, but you and I have been talking about it. And then in the second segment, which may go out like a week or so later than that, then the other, we're going to talk about some recent experiences that each of us have had when we've been out wandering amongst the crowd and what it's making us think about. So anywho, that's the plan for today. And we've been chatting for a few minutes before we started, so I don't know how many opening niceties that we have left to go through, and maybe we should just hop right into the.
I don't think people expect niceties. I was going to say from us, but definitely not from me.
Just opening banter maybe is better for what we.
Let's just go banter. Okay, done. Check.
Okay, so we're like. It's been a few weeks since most of these topics came to us that we wanted to talk about. But Danny was not feeling well, and I had a lot of crazy chaos with work and travel and car accident and all kinds of other things. So we've been sitting for a long time and ready to talk about this. But I haven't been watching too many things RFK related in the last probably 2 weeks, other than the obvious clips that have been going around the last couple of days about the Roger Waters incident, and we'll get to that as part of this. But I went through a couple of weeks back in April and maybe early May, where I was watching quite a lot of RFK Jr. interviews. Even though for a while I was watching pretty much any of them that came in my feeds or whatnot, just because I was trying to really I was trying to build a profile. I was trying to build a dossier per se, or whatever it is. So I watched almost all of them. And then at a certain point, I began only watching the ones that I thought would be more oppositional to him. I don't need to listen to the people who are thanking him for his service and telling him what a hero he is and all of that kind of, cultish mind control crap. So I started really paying only attention to ones that I either knew would be oppositional or thought could have some oppositional tone to it. And it was through listening to those that I really got better information, right? And it started with that All In podcast, right, that I sent to you. I watched that. It's been a month ago now. And then it continued with when he was on Breaking Points and Crystal gave him that horrible interview and all of that kind of stuff. But I actually think on some levels, those gave me more information to work with to create my new position and opinion. And that is that I believe RFK Jr. will be the establishment candidate for president from the Democrat side. And I'm prepared to chat this all out and defend that position if you have a difference of opinion. But the way everything's, yeah, you're with me?
Well, I don't have a difference of opinion. I'm just watching it all. First and foremost, he's a fucking Kennedy. So for anyone to say he's some black sheep, dark horse, wild card, X Factor is absurd.
Right.
And just watching how it's all coming down the pike, nothing would shock me. So I have my own thoughts, but I'm not in opposition to you at all.
Okay, so one of the things that was happening for me as I, in the beginning, it was mostly he was being interviewed by people who either agree with him or are sympathetic to his positions, even if they don't agree, because they also oppose sort of the mainstream liberal orthodoxy or whatever the fuck it is in their own way, even if it's not in the same way they do. So I felt very when I listen to those kind of interviews, I'm always listening for the gotcha, with him. Like that, the thing I want to catch him in, like a Heather and Brett moment, or some moment that betray, like when he was talking to Freddie Sayers, I heard him say, like, we need to capture this rebellion before somebody else hijacks it. So my feeling was oppositional to him when I was listening to him be interviewed by people who were not oppositional to him. Right. And then for some reason that All In podcast came up, and that surprised me a tiny bit at the time. Right. And I knew that, like, those people were kind of establishment, but as I'd never listened to the whole podcast, but I hear people who I consider to be establishment refer to that podcast as something they listen to. Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to jump in before we get too far away from the Freddie Sayers, only because that happened like at least a month ago.
6 weeks ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So the one thing, and I believe that you and I mentioned this, but the reason I'm bringing it up again is because they brought it up on No Agenda last week, which I thought was odd given the lag time, was when he went into a spiel of, like, we're in Ukraine for the right reasons. And it's like, yes, you can see he's politicking, like he's saying we need to pull out, but he's saying all the bullshit, which are lies. So No Agenda did call him out on saying we're in there for the right reasons. Putin is a brutal despot, like whatever it is. So there was that bullshit. But what they didn't highlight on that No Agenda, which was in that same conversation, and in fact in that same breath, was him saying his solution was to bring in the UN army to occupy Ukraine, and that I haven't heard any so-called patriot or freedom stander mention the ridiculousness of that statement.
Yeah, I haven't heard anyone either. And I think it goes to, like, it's the same thing about, like, when we point out the problem with Robert Malone, like the hypnosis of the thing they say that that people like, overwhelms the critical thinking towards the thing that they say that they might disagree with. So because everything has been so heavily COVID focused for the last several years, being in agreement about that is more important than being, like, in alignment or, like, obeying those ethics in all the other arenas. Like, that hypnosis has worked. And, like, it's kind of like the equal opposite of, like, when people aren't, like, you have to have a vaccine passport for COVID, but if you have chickenpox, you can come to the party. It's like you're right. Remember when I was pointing that out, like people were only scared of COVID and they didn't really, like, it's okay if, like, I have venereal disease or whatever, but if I have COVID, stay the fuck away. Right. Like, but that's the mind control of the current moment. Right. Okay. So I agree with what you're saying there. And I remember when you listened to the Freddie Sayers, you came to me and you said, like, he actually sounds really reasonable. Like, I'm having trouble picking him apart except for this, right? And I didn't listen.
Also, his continued lie that he's not anti-vax, which, P.S., I'm tired of him using the language of the propagandists. And for anyone who has a sane mind listening to this, we need to stop using their language. But he has been fighting the dangers of vaccines for the 10 years before COVID. So to take that stance continually as a means of getting the Democrats to support him is intellectually dishonest. And for me personally, I find it gross and weaselly.
Yeah. So, like, okay, I don't know what he means when he says that, but if what he's against, if what he means to say is, hey, I think they can be available, and if people want them, they can take them. If that's what he means, like that he wouldn't outlaw them, then he should clarify that. But if not, then he's leaving it open for exactly sort of what you're talking about. Okay, so you were saying how reasonable he sounded, except for the UN thing. I didn't listen to the whole interview because, like, after he said, like, the capture the rebellion thing, like, for me it was like I got my aha moment, and that's what I was looking for at that point, right? But then I saw him on the All In podcast, which, like I said, I was surprised because I see people who are like, they attempt to mind control us and condition into thinking are alternative thinkers, like The Hill and Breaking Points and stuff like that. Those people often refer to the All In podcast, right? So, like, for them, it's like some kind of alternative podcast, but for you and I, it's basically mainstream people. So, and one of the guys who's on the All In podcast, I've been noticing him show up in a lot of places lately, which is funny because just before we started, I just typed in RFK Jr. on Google to see what the current words of the day are about him. And this person is there present with him. So I think this is some sort of like mediary or handler for the RFK kind of scenario. And
What's his name?
His name is David Sachs. And he was one of the co-founders of PayPal with Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. Right. So, okay. So all of the people who
and this guy's considered some sort of alternative rogue?
No. He's well, this is what I'm saying is like I always thought of him as like a fairly mainstream guy. Right. But what I'm understanding as I watched it, so I watched the All In podcast with RFK, and then I've also watched a few other interviews with this David Sachs guy. Right.
Who went to Stanford, P.S.
Right. And I went and the other people, there was only one person on the All In podcast who I really don't have any other familiarity with than watching him there that day. All of them are really completely mainstream, but with the exception that each of them seems to have one position that kind of goes against the orthodoxy of their mainstream like thing. Right. So, and David's thing, so David Sachs seems to be like maybe kind of like center right, where the others on the podcast maybe are a little bit more center left, but each of them has like a pet topic that they're willing to consider alternative theories on, right? So it makes them like 1% less vanilla than just watching standard mainstream news or something like that, because each has their one open window in the house, right? That they're willing to get some fresh air on, right?
Okay, and did you know that he founded genie.com, the genealogy website?
I don't know if I knew that, but I knew he does all of this angel investing, and there's another kind of term for the kind of investing he does. He talked about it on one of the interviews. I saw him interviewed by someone for like an hour.
Yeah, he's angel invested in Airbnb, Eventbrite, Facebook, SpaceX, Palantir, PayPal, Postmates, Uber.
Right.
But notice the genealogy, how that ties into a lot of the like larger fuckery.
Right?
Right.
Okay. So he seems the one.
Oh, and he donated nearly $70,000 to Hillary's presidential campaign.
Right. And he presents as sort of like center right.
Now he's given $50,000 to DeSantis.
Right. But he seems to be the one who is most excited about RFK. It was his idea to have him on the podcast. Right.
So at this point, I can no longer hear, like, because these are the pieces I'm putting together, and I have been listening to a lot of dark journalists, but if this guy's investing in SpaceX,
right,
you have RFK,
right,
and he's giving money to DeSantis, who's making Florida this, like, space
Israel. He's making Florida Israel.
So how much of this is, like, UFO stuff? Anyway, continue.
Okay. Fair point, right? Like, UFOs are never the place my mind first goes to, but okay.
But with the Kennedy family, for me at this point, like, Kennedy was assassinated because of the UFO file. That feels inextricably bound. Then you also have Trump with, his uncle and Tesla and their UFO. So this, and then what DeSantis is doing.
It's always a fight over free energy. It's always a fight over fusion and genetics.
Right.
Which is how free energy is attained. Okay. So each member of the All In podcast, right? I think there's 3 of them or 4 of them or something like that. They're pretty vanilla, but like each one of them has like one different colored sprinkle about them that gives them, so that makes the conversation interesting, right?
Yep.
So I listened to RFK Jr. there, and then I suddenly had the same feeling as you. I'm like, this guy sounds really fucking reasonable, right? Like, and I really listened, like I listened with a focus that I don't often listen to. When I say, just to be 100% clear, someone sounding reasonable doesn't mean I like them, I agree with them, or I think they would be good. It's just like your sound, like someone asks a question and the response he gives to the question asked feels thoughtful, reasonable, and either well-informed or acknowledges the fact that he's not well-informed enough to give an intelligent answer, which you almost never hear from politicians or public people who like to tell us what to do.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm listening, and whenever he's always able to offer evidence for things he pushes back on. And when he has no evidence, he says, I can't give you an answer. Let me go find out more. I'll need to look into that. And then next time I come back, you can ask me and we can have an intelligent conversation about that.
Yep.
And so the watching his temperament and even how the way he responds, even when like under attack, whether the attack be like a genuine one, meaning that the person genuinely disagrees, or if the attack is astroturf, meaning that person is just spouting talking points that they've been assigned. Right? He takes it in. He doesn't get into like the shit throwing like kind of thing. He reasons, he responds in a way that to anyone who's being fair and honest is like he's behaving like actually in the way you would want a person with a lot of power to behave, right? And then the other thing is like even the things that I highly disagree with him on, right? Highly, like he can reason his position well.
Like what?
I'm trying to think of one that well, I guess this wouldn't be me disagreeing. Like when I'm listening to him talk about nuclear, right? Like all I care, I'm like, why doesn't anyone ever ask him about fusion? Why there's always the conversation about fission and like, this kind of like cheap nuclear power for, the Michael Schellenberger stuff. So I'm sitting there having to push aside my agitation I would love it if he came back and was like, I'd get behind it if we were talking fusion and some of these other things that would actually liberate people, right? But so I'm there's part of my head that's mad at this conversation. But when I'm listening,
I think most people don't have the amount of knowledge that you have on nuclear.
Right. So when I say I disagree, in this case, this is what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. But the reasons that he gives for why he is opposed to the nuclear that they are talking about feel somewhat reasonable and very reasonable based on the information he has. The information he has, the way he's disputing the challenge from somebody, like, okay, like this, like, I think the opinions that he was offering on all of the things on that podcast felt like these were his genuine opinions, and he seemed very measured, and that when he says, I'll need more information, and if you can convince me that I should change my mind, I will, I believe it.
He means I'm going to wait until Oliver Stone gives me the rundown on nuclear, and then I'm going to have a come to Jesus moment.
Right.
So stay tuned for that. And we'll show my ability to be reasonable and change my mind when Hollywood tells me what to think.
Right. But this is, one of the things about him, and one of the reasons I believe he will be the establishment candidate if he isn't already, right, is that he does not have such a large ego that he has to know everything right at the moment. He's willing to say, I don't know.
He can pretend. Let's not kid ourselves that this nuke think isn't a long game psyop.
But he's under the prior psyop, right? So he's under, remember.
He's a Kennedy. This guy is an actor. I don't believe this I'm a reasonable everyday dude for one fucking second.
Okay.
He has been bred to be a politician. They all lie.
Right. They all lie. But people have different styles about them. And we don't get too many who are willing to say, I don't know, or I was wrong, or
that's
let me think about it.
That's his thing. That's his whole thing. He's the I don't know guy until they tell him what he's supposed to know. Now.
So, okay. So my opinion is a little bit different. At least at the moment that I was consuming this, it was a little bit different. And that is part of what will make him effective is that may be his natural tendency, right? That may be how he really is. And so it's a question of those surrounding him using the way he genuinely deals with information to do exactly what you're talking about.
Hold up though. What do we do? Like, where do we, and assuming everything you're saying is correct, then how does his position as partner at Vantage Point Capital and creating a smart ocean and everything fit in?
So like, I don't have enough information. I haven't done as much research on that as you, so I can't speak intelligently to that.
Okay,
But
Mr. Kennedy.
I have heard him say like he is completely a capitalist, well, not a capitalist, a free market person. And he's like, has, in my opinion, he's an environmentalist, but one of those ones that like has a lot of the misinformation about environmentalism, right?
Well, that's dangerous.
100% that's dangerous. Like, I'm not, yeah, that's definitely dangerous. But so I can't say anything smart or anything about that. But I remember you showing me.
Climate change is a public health crisis. Yeah. I'm reading, this is straight from RFK. The science is really strong in telling us that with climate change accelerating, we expect heat waves to be more frequent, more intense, and longer.
I think
this guy's a fucking idiot.
Right, but I think he believes that. I think he believes
that's dangerous. Then that's very dangerous.
I agree with
this person to be in power.
I think it's dangerous for anyone to be in power because whatever they believe will become the law for everybody else, and that's why I'm voluntarist, right? But I think that like he's the thing that I'm saying about him that makes him a little different, and by different doesn't mean better, just a different flavor, right? Is that he like I think he has more genuine beliefs about these things than some of the other people running who are literally only doing what their donors tell them to do.
He's less full of shit.
Right. But that makes him more easy to manipulate in a certain way. Right? Okay. So I listened to him on this thing and I'm like, wow, you know what? Like, this is the new weaponization, is that we are at a point here where the system has gone so far off the rails, right? That I think even they recognize that they're going to have to throw people a bone if they want people to stay engaged in continue to believe in the idea of government and authority, right? So think about what a Kennedy presidency, particularly this Kennedy presidency, would mean. Most of the conspiracy theorists and the anti-vaxxers or the anti-lockdowners or whatever would feel like they had some kind of victory, like they had been thrown some kind of bone. And so they'll be tricked into voting again, first of all.
Of course.
But they'll be tricked into voting again, and they will feel like they have made progress.
Of course. That's what we see happening now in the alt media, who I'm witnessing throw 100% of their support behind him without properly vetting him. They're just so excited because the guy who wrote The Real Anthony Fauci and gave them one drop of truth is running, that all of the defenses are down on all of the other issues that this whole thing was set up to move forward, but very few people understand. And if you do understand it, you're pushed to the back of the room, you're suppressed, you're censored, and you're treated like dog shit.
Right. Okay. So correct. So also, I was observing how like a lot of the far left people, like even the ones who've like totally given up on Bernie and they're like very against that, they're kind of soft for RFK because he speaks about, you know, going after the people, some of the banks and the corporations that have escaped the discipline of the free market by what the government, the public-private partnerships do and all of that kind of stuff, right? So he speaks a language that sort of could create this sort of false idea that we have overcome certain divisiveness and unity. Like, you can do this thing of like pulling the MAGA and the disaffected Bernie Sanders people together. And like, weirdly, like the people in the center who, while they oppose most of his positions, are not as violently against him as they are against someone like Donald Trump, probably because the name Kennedy still mind controls them and they have these fantasies of returning to that level of time. So this is the person that would placate the most amount of people, and like a lot of people would go to sleep at the wheel for a small amount of time or a long amount of time, right? It would be, I was talking to someone, I forget who was talking about like a study that had been done that like, even though they say they don't like it, most people really like the idea of a monarchy. And the Kennedy family is the closest thing. They talk about Camelot and all of this kind of stuff, right? Like in people's heads, like it's crazy how people act about the Queen and Princess Di and shit like that. Like, why do you want that?
I remember Lua, like when Princess Di was getting whatever and like watching at her house, and they had all these like commemorative pieces and pictures, and I never got it. I was just like, who gives a shit?
It's weird, but like people
weird.
have this like it's got to be some sort of like ancestral genetic weird kind of, I don't know what it is, right? Okay, so he does that, right? So like he accomplishes that on like a large scale, but most importantly, for almost everybody, whether you like him or dislike him, he would represent somehow, not for you and I, but for most people, change. And so it would give people the belief that change, the system can still, like change can come, right? Like we can,
but within the system,
within the system, this is the whole thing.
That's the whole thing.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, even if everything he believes opposed the system, he still believes that there needs to be a system, and that he believes in the Constitution, he believes in the founding fathers, and he believes in the American experiment of democracy, right? So that, just that in and of itself creates a boundary around which, you know, like something, you know, like they can operate and sort of maneuver him. The more danger is for people to be like, you know what, there's no one in this election that I'm interested in that I feel represents even any of my values. So I'm not paying attention to any more of this. I'm going to quit my job. I'm not going to vote. I'm going to stop paying taxes. That's much more dangerous to them than letting somebody into the circus tent who may or may not really disagree with some of their most sacredly held positions, right? So I'm thinking that as I'm listening to him, and then I listened to him on with Sagar and Crystal, and she just made an ass of herself. Like that was like the most irritating thing ever to watch. Go ahead.
Well, wait, hold up. I want to go back to the last one during that interview, because it's this, I just want to point out the propaganda technique, and I'm sure everyone watching us knows this, but on that show where they're like, we just like to give you a chance to defend yourself against this vaccine thing and get the record straight. And that kind of setup, which is saying you've done something very wrong and now we're giving you the opportunity to repent, is so manipulative. And
I'm all in podcast. I'm all in.
Correct.
Podcast. Yes.
And I would really have a lot more respect for him if he would call out the technique and say, you are right now projecting your prejudice onto me and making it seem like I need to apologize or backpedal or change my perspective to appease your mind control. And it goes right back to him using the anti-vax. For me, it's showing me that he's a weenie. It's like, take control. Trump would never do that. Trump would call that shit out, and Trump is always in control. I have plenty of issues with Trump, but that is showing me where he is on a leash and is towing the line like a little weenie, and I don't like it.
Well, but I see that leash is more that he's still under the mind control too. He believes that he has to argue within the bounds set. He's a lawyer, right? You have to argue within the bounds set up by the court, not within the bounds set up by truth, reality, and morality and all of that kind of stuff.
But the fact that it's coming from someone who spent 10 years of his career fighting for compensation for vaccine injury, and he's still playing subversive, subordinate to that, is not impressive to me, as this is a strong masculine leader. This is a little pussy.
This has always been the reason why he was allowed to ascend to the top of the anti-vax throne, was because he's a lawyer, right? And whenever somebody, that's a certain kind of enclosure, right? Like he's not going to fall for certain pitfalls, but he's going to fall for other pitfalls because those are the pillars of what that whole idea is set up around. Right. So, okay. So but the other thing about that podcast is, again, he definitely did what you said, but he also does say, he will say to them, and they never have an answer, like, show me where something that I have said about all this is wrong. And they never have it. They just kind of like, oh, well, you know, there's some studies and da-da-da-da. Even like, they're much more intellectual than Crystal is, but they essentially did the same exact thing, but less belligerently.
1,000%. But it's like this strategy, this script that's coming out of the left of like, we're giving you the opportunity to repent for your sin of going against the party line. And like, that's not journalism at all. That's propaganda, and it's disgusting. And we need to continue to call it out instead of going along with it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good, fair point. And those people that are the hosts of the podcasts, they are propagandists. And
Correct.
Kennedy is under mind control, no doubt, right? So on some level, like, you just don't get to be from a family like that and not have like a shaping of your opinions that has gone on that is more intense than the average person.
Totally.
Right. Okay. So, but anyway, but after listening to him there, I started to have in my mind, I'm like, I think he's going to be the establishment candidate, right? Because it satisfies so many needs, urges, and desires of disparate groups of the public, right?
I don't know, because he's not like a Black trans being.
Well, right, but no, right. He's not a Black trans being at all. But there's a lot of groups of people that he does satisfy some primal need of theirs, to the point that they're willing to like engage in something that they had felt sort of like, I'm kind of done with this.
Yes, in a sane world. But keeping in mind that we have clown world to the extreme, this is one area where I will challenge you, is if the left would dare put another white dude as their candidate. We'll see. I mean, they did it with, the potato that they call Biden. But they might parade around, Michael Obama, swing his dick with all of zero political experience whatsoever.
So I think that like, when I say he may be the establishment candidate, of the people that were being presented so far, I think he's the one the establishment would get behind. I do think it's possible that late in the game there may be something like what you're talking about that pops up. But for now, I think that like they're letting disparate groups of people believe that they have their moment of hope and sanity to get behind here, and they're seeing sort of like, well, what can we do with this, right? Like, if we decided to completely switch tactics and kind of like get behind this guy, but it works if we get behind him but pretend like we're not behind him, because then people have that feeling that like, oh, they oppose him and so we want him.
Yeah, they changed their mind. They can evolve, so I can evolve too, because my influencers are showing me how it's done.
But there's also people who only want to support someone that the system opposes, so they'll continue to pretend that they oppose him to try and gather up as many people who are like, I like this guy because they, right? But secretly,
he's the underdog.
Secretly, they really want him because he puts a large amount of people of many different groups back into hypnosis, or maintains their hypnosis, right? So then I saw him on with Sagar and Crystal, and that just made her look, I was like, wow, dude, how much did they pay you to look like that big of an asshole, right? On that thing. And I think a lot of people who disagree with him about his stance on vaccines are now supporting him because they felt like what she did was unfair.
What did she do?
She basically, like, the same thing you're talking about asked him to defend himself, but then didn't let him. Then she wouldn't let him talk when he tried.
Right.
Isn't
that why Don Lemon got fired? Anyway,
no, Don Lemon, yeah, I know. So Don Lemon got fired for the thing with that Vivek Rashomani guy or whatever it was. I can't.
He just wouldn't shut up on his like little whatever.
But what she did, the way she did it, was so childish and egregious that a person who disagreed with everything he said would feel like, hey, wait a second, like, if you're asking someone a question and then you don't let them answer, like, that's not good. I'm going to go see what he really has to say somewhere where they let him talk. And then they might find that, oh, what he's saying sounds somewhat reasonable, or he agrees with me on this other thing, so I'm willing to give him a shot. Right. So what she did actually increased. But this is the other thing, like, the system, they're playing this game of like not including him in, they lead him off of some things, but then
he just got kicked off of Instagram.
He got kicked off of Instagram again?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So they play that game, but he immediately, like, the day he said he was running, he was like almost at 20%, right? And so like it's that game of like, we're not going to include him, and that will get people to get behind. Like it's this full game going with that thing, right? Okay, so that became my position, is that he is going to be probably, likely, at least for now, the establishment candidate, but they're going to pretend he's not, because that creates the illusion of a dark horse or a grassroots or a whatever kind of thing. And let's see if they want to play with that, because the biggest thing that the system needs is people to start to believe in it again, right? In some ways, like the amount of control they can have if people don't begin to reinvest their belief in that system wanes despite who the candidates are, and he's a person who accomplishes that. Then this whole thing came up this past, by the way, just reiterating, I disagree with him strongly on a lot of his positions about things, and I don't think when people challenge him on some of those positions, I don't necessarily think his answers about like Ukraine and whatever are good. Then this thing happens with Roger Waters.
Okay, the thing with Ukraine though, he's saying we need to get out.
Right, but the thing about the brutal dictator, and the other thing I didn't like.
But I feel like that's where he's lying. That's where I feel like he's a politician. Like, and I'm just guessing, I'm filling in the blanks, that I don't think he thinks we're in Ukraine for the right reasons, but he's saying that to appease the Democrats that do, which is why I don't trust this guy. It's the same thing as like him squelching virus, no virus. The same thing about him saying he's on an anti-vaxxer. He says things to the public that don't line up.
So I don't know enough about Kennedy family's feelings about different factions within the Soviet Union or Russia. Like I know that he was part of John F. Kennedy was part of the like appeasement from like a bigger war than supposedly, allegedly, right? But I don't know if he feels like if the Kennedy's position, because I think it's a family position on something like this, is that that Putin represents the part of the Soviet Union that they were against, not the part that they made friends with.
I mean, let's say that's true. I did just also hear something, and I think it might have been on No Agenda again, the only thing I ever listened to. But, he's mentioned on several interviews that his son fought in this Ukraine war, that's not true.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me that that's not true.
Right.
Right. So, okay. So then a couple of things happened, right? So what was the other thing? There was something and I just lost my train of thought. I'm having one of those moments that I sort of okay, hold on a second. My brain, there was two things that he did that like I didn't. The Roger Waters, but there was something else that happened a few days before that. He gave an answer to something that I found like highly unsatisfactory. Oh, I know what it was. Somebody asked him about why he goes on so many podcasts of so many people who are considered like conspiracy theorists or disinformation or this or that or the other thing. And he's just like, I'll talk to anybody, but the only people's podcasts I won't go on are Alex Jones and one other people because my wife won't let me. Right. And so that was interesting. Like there's a part of me, like we all like have, people we love that sometimes like there's something that we would like to do that would be irritating to them and we just choose not to because whatever.
That's called codependence.
But we're not usually running for president, right?
It was also his wife who apparently required the vax passports or proof of vax for some party she threw. And he was like, well, that was just my wife. That was not me. And it's like, well, how's that going to work for your presidency when your dumb liberal wife jumps in and tells you to do shit and you clearly don't have the balls to stand in your own integrity against your Hollywood actress wife?
Well, then she's also, I think a lot of men are under the mind control of their wives and vice versa, yes, right? But she can do her vaccine passport party, but he can't go on Alex Jones, which sets up the handler-subject relationship in the direction of her being the handler and him being the subject. So I heard that and my mind started thinking, and then the Roger Waters thing happened, right? And I'm sorry, I don't buy that he did not know Roger Waters' position on Israel and Palestine. Like everybody who follows even like just sub-alternative news has seen him on RT, knows that he holds that position. So the only way you wouldn't know that he holds that position is if you didn't know him as anything other than a member of Pink Floyd. If you just knew him as a member of the band and not as a political activist, I could say, okay, you didn't know. But he obviously, like Roger Waters is much more outspoken about Israel-Palestine than he was about COVID or Ukraine or anything like that. So you can't know one without the other. That would be like me saying, I know you, but I never realized you had a gap between your teeth.
Right.
Right. Like, okay. So that part that caught my attention as soon as I saw about that tweet. But then when I listened to him defend the removal and then the subsequent tweets, and he basically just snapped right into the Israeli lobby position that all politicians do, I knew at that moment for sure he's the establishment candidate, because he can break all of the other rules. But at the end of the day, he has a handler who he's under the mind control of. Yep. And the one group, like, so this is what's interesting. Like all of the other like rails you're not supposed to touch, you're really allowed to touch them. The only one you're really not allowed to touch is the Israel one.
Well, it's interesting because you and I, before we started recording, we're talking about the censorship situation, and we agreed we don't want to bore the audience with the ongoing, struggles that you and I deal with. But when we were talking about why we really get as hard hit as we are, and for you it's nuclear and it's DNA, I think for me it's because I push back against the ADL in Israel, and I think that is what has gotten me on this like special list.
I maybe that could be part of it. I think it's because of your language work, because I think they would rather have everybody else running around doing the like weird etymology of words and explaining how like everything is really everything else, and that this thing is also really this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing, and creating like this blob of amorphous goo, and not using language as like an empowerment tool. Just everything is decoding everyone else's symbolism. I think they want everybody watching a shit ton of that stuff and not doing the thing. Yours is really using language as a technology, whereas the others using language as an artifact.
Ooh.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Totally. So I think that's really what it is. I actually think that the Israel ADL thing, like that's one of those things they like people to get caught up in, because they want to take down your podcast for talking about that. And then they want you to make 200 podcasts about the fact that they took down your podcast for talking about that, because then you're not working on your language.
1,000%.
And the people listening to it are not listening to me talk about DNA or whatever, right?
Totally.
Time
wasting. Do we want to play the short video that they played on Twitter of his stance on Israel?
We could, right? I was just going to say, the last thing I was going to say, and then we can show it. When I listened to his defense, it was the weakest defense ever. He didn't explain all of the reasons why Israel is right and Palestine is wrong. He basically just said, because of my family's history with these scenarios, I have to hold this position. And this is...
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
And this is where I go to the tradition, the belief in like governance, and this sort of like maintaining the family tradition of we've always believed this, and so we had to believe this, creates the kind of natural boundary that makes him a safe candidate and allows the people to think that they got to say. And that's it.
And that is something that we hear him say a lot. My family, how it's been. So he is not like left the nest, right? He hasn't cut that cord. He is just an extension of the Kennedy family legacy, in the same way he's an extension of what his wife will let him or not let him do.
It reminds me, so like I've been watching a lot of tennis. I always watch a lot of tennis, but it's French Open right now, so it's a major, so there's a lot more on. And I was explaining to Laura, so there's two players that have been towards the top of the game for many, many years now, and are very frustrated at the fact that they have not been able to break through and win a Grand Slam, right? And it's Stefanos Tsitsipas and Alexander Zverev. And both of them have their fathers as coaches, and both of them, this is the problem for them, in my opinion, and the opinion of many tennis analysts and other voices, that like really the things, parts of their game and whatever that should have improved haven't, and maybe they should, have a different coach. But these two young men are like kind of whiny and spoiled and daddy's boys or whatever it is. And they don't have the balls to be like, Dad, I love you, but I need to do this for myself. I need to be my own man and try it with someone else. And if I strike out on my own. And it's the same thing with this. Like, if you really are gonna be someone who brings change, then you can still love your family and you can still agree with them on some things, but your positions should be your own. You should have them because they're your feeling. And if they happen to align with your family, that's fine. And so to me, he's exactly like Stefanos Tsitsipas and Alexander Zverev.
It's
right?
called individuation. It's like a very basic step in adulthood. It's like, so often when I'm, talking to people and they're like, well, I just wasn't raised like that. I'm like, are you 12? Like, who gives a shit how you were raised? At some point, you separate from your family, you disconnect from your programming, and you create your own opinions, your own rituals, your own way of doing things. He is telling us consistently that he hasn't done that and he's not going to do that.
He's not going to do that. Right. It's more upholding tradition, which is very much like that's what the monarchy is all about. It's about upholding tradition and passing that tradition from person to person through this anointed whatever, right? Yep. So okay, but I think we can show the video because it was literally the weakest defense I've ever seen. It was so stupid.
Super stupid. Okay, so I'm pulling it up. Okay, I'm sharing our screen.
Remember to share sound.
Yep. Here we go.
A couple tweets were put up.
Courage.
Mr. Kenny, a lot of people are confused about the tweet storm. I call it the tweet heard around the world. A couple tweets were put up in support of Roger Waters and then taken down. Do you want to give us a little explanation of why they were taken down and also your stance on Israel and Palestine?
I tweeted that. I made the tweet applauding Roger Waters' courage in opposing the COVID mandates and the Ukraine war. I was unaware of his position on Israel. And when I learned that, I immediately took it down. My position of Israel is that I support Israel. My family has a long relationship with Israel. I support its right to exist and its right to protect its security.
And the Palestinians?
And a humane outcome and a recognition ultimately of the aspirations of the Palestinian people is important for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So one group gets rights and the other ones get their aspirations. Yeah. This was like but did you notice this demeanor of his was different than I've ever seen him? He looked mad. He had a scowl on his face. He had the MK Ultra eye was way more closed than it usually is. Right.
Well, and also why do we have to homogenize our support? So he was supporting Roger Waters' perspective on Ukraine and COVID, and because he has a difference of opinion about something that wasn't even at the forefront of the conversation, now you must rescind. So you're playing the same woke cancel culture game as the mind-controlled retards. So you may have won the Democrat support, but I'm out with that shit.
Well, I mean, I was never in, but yes, I had that same thought when I was outside. Like I was standing around waiting for some food somewhere yesterday, and I was thinking about that same thing. The smoother way to have played it would have been, I disagree with his stance on Israel, but I fully support his right to say it. And then that would have even drawn in some other people to support him, right? So he didn't play that one well, but you can see, did you see Dennis Kucinich standing back there,
oh, we have a problem,
right? And it just, I don't think Robert Kennedy is enjoying this experience he's having this week with this, right? Because I don't know. He may actually not believe what he just said. He may be more in alignment with the things that you or I think, but this is the line he's towing, and he's fine to toe the line if he doesn't have to be embarrassed publicly about it. But in this case, he has to be embarrassed publicly. So he's scowling, but also, did you see that MK Ultra eye was like?
Oh, totally. I'm also curious, now I'm looking up ADL, but who's pulling his puppet strings? Because his handlers.
What's the relationship between the Kennedys and Israel that goes back so long?
Okay, so I'm gonna have to look that up. I mean, the first thing that pops up is ADL slams RFK for reckless Anne Frank comparison comments. That was back in 22. Okay, so let's look
Oh,
up
yeah.
Kennedy, what is it, family, Israel?
Kennedy family in Israel, yeah.
Yad Kennedy. This is a place. Israel is behind serial assassinations of Kennedy brothers. This is in the Tehran Times. The Herzog family.
So he's doing this because he's afraid he's going to get killed if he doesn't toe this line? Is that what he's saying? Did he just reveal that it's the Israelis that fucking took it? Like that's what that article seems to say. Israel is behind the assassination of the Kennedy brothers?
But he's gone on record in saying that he said it's the CIA.
Right.
Which, P.S., why would any of the CIA basically runs the country / the world at this point. So
right,
why
but maybe he's allowed to say it's the CIA, but he's not supposed to say it's Israel. But
Probably.
by what just happened, right? Like that, I hadn't thought about Israel being that. We hear all kinds of other crazy theories and whatever, but nobody. To the best of my knowledge, I haven't heard somebody propose that Israel took out the Kennedy brothers. Right. So like was him being forced into this uncomfortable position and being willing to do it, willing to be forced. Did this also betray the fact that there is a tense long-term relationship between Israel and the Kennedy family?
I'd have to do more research on it. Yeah. I mean, the Jewish, I'm just reading the JNSorg thing. They don't like his, they didn't like what he said either. Like they weren't appeased.
Well, no, now he'll spend forever trying to appease, which is exactly the position they love having people in.
I also love that this JNS.org is defining Roger Waters as an anti-Semite. Aging rock star / anti-Semite Roger Waters. I'm just so tired of Israel criticism equals you are stapled with the label anti-Semite. It's disgusting.
Right. So, but again, right. He did it. So this seems to be the one thing, this is the one thing that is non-negotiable if you're going to be in power, is to not be somehow under the control of Israel, because the ones who aren't are either not in Washington, D.C. anymore, or they're dead.
Right.
Right. So I think so this entire exercise exposes a lot of things, but I think adds support to the idea that he either is the establishment candidate or he is going through a long-term audition to see if he will be the establishment candidate.
Totally.
Right.
So I got a email from Charles Eisenstein this week because I had asked him to blurb my book.
Right.
And I hadn't heard back from him from a long time. So I got an email this week saying, hey, apologies for the lag time. I'm so swamped. I've just been pulled into RFK's campaign, so I'm really not going to have time. And I said, I totally understand, as long as you're on the inside, why don't you recommend that he comes out publicly against the Patriot Act and he can be the one candidate who's going to rescind it, given that Trump actually renewed it? He would be able to pull a lot of the votes from the so-called patriots for taking a stance against that. I mean, that's one thing I'm wondering is are we ever going to talk about the fact that our country remains under emergency orders?
That's what you going to, yeah. I was just going to ask you, you called me the other day and we're like, where's the candidate whose platform is just rescinding emergency powers?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I still wouldn't vote for that person. Right.
No.
But but it is interesting, right? There would be no need to do all these other crazy measures that people have to spend a lot of time and money and build movements and coalitions around. If somebody just pulled the emergency powers, then it's kind of things would naturally fall back into whatever place they should be in. But yeah, that's the other. I would love to see him confronted on that. I would love to see him confronted on that.
It actually has me, and that's why I'm playing nice with Charles. It has me wanting to play nice to see if I could actually ask him that question. Because think about it. We would have no conversations about mandatory vaccines. We had no conversations about domestic terrorism and the rescinding of the First Amendment. Like, so many of these things that we waste time talking about would be off the table. One candidate was honest and had the balls to get us out from under that unconstitutional fucking straitjacket.
Yeah, I mean, like that one. There's like a few things that could be somebody's platform, or that if they were to do something, like one of the things that I think, you know, most money gets sucked up and wasted on military, on defense, right? So like there's plenty of people out there that want a large military and want a large defense budget. Great, let them pay for it. So so basically, rather than use it, I mean, it doesn't really work like this anyway, but they pretend it does. Rather than using everybody's tax budget, the people who want war can sign up to fight in it themselves, or they can fund it themselves. And then suddenly there would all of a sudden be way less money for war. And so that also has the you know, after effect of ending all of these other problems that we have, right? So, you know, there's things like that they can't even ever consider that, because they still believe in governance. Right. And like, there's no, like, just the fact that there is, like, anybody who wants to create a government, that's like the same as having an Emergency Powers Act. Right. Like when all of these people are like, but if we didn't have government, then we'd have anarchy or whatever. Right. We would have craziness, law of the jungle, whatever it is. Right. But the only way any of these like monopolies and things like that are able to come about is because of subsidies and partnerships with government, right? So the government literally creates all of the scenarios that people say that we need government to control. So the enactment of government is the same as enacting emergency powers. It's like, we need someone to have a power that no one else has.
Right, but I mean, allegedly, as a constitutional republic, we have like a trifecta of branches that are supposed to act as checks and balances upon one another, so that government doesn't become the monstrosity that it actually is. But we're not addressing the corruption that has infected it, which is being propped up by the emergency powers.
And that corruption needs to be rubber stamped, right? And so anything that is, all of the things that have become part of like Bill of Rights or Constitution or all of these, you know, court decisions, these are all, some of them may seem small to people, carving away at the supposed point of what they say the United States about, which is about individual liberty and freedom, right? But when something has the government's rubber stamp on it, for some reason, people see that as not corruption. So the creation of government was the original Emergency Powers Act.
I mean, I understand. I know the Mark Passio work. I know that government means mind control. Like, I see all of it. I can also see an idealistic angle where it could have worked if it hadn't been co-opted in the way that it did. I'm also, I don't know if you saw the show I did with Jeffrey Phillips, but it was on market anarchy. And that was really helpful for me to understand, like, oh, there is a practical, implementable way to do anarchy that actually could serve people when combined with a free market economy.
So I listened to some of that interview with Jeffrey, and I stopped at a certain point and didn't go back. So I heard you guys talking about how his positions on market anarchy were based on some speech that he had listened to. And I need to listen to that speech. So it was interesting to listen to him. I thought the whole opening segment about the veggie oil for the car and stuff like that was interesting. And it, you know, I'm thinking about how I can explain this so that makes sense, right? Like, let's say you're opposed to the idea of market anarchy, right? To say that these people are like in on destroying the world and slavery or whatever is completely torn apart by the fact that like this person was trying to figure out how to take used vegetable oil and use that to power cars so that we didn't ruin the environment, right? So I think that like, even when some of these people are wrong, we have to do a deeper look into the things about their life that are true to see what kind of person they actually are. And the idea that he is somehow evil because he's mistaken, or if he is, I'm not saying he is or not, right? Like, it was just interesting to listen to that whole thing, right? And then I remember I had to stop listening for a minute when he was like, have you heard of Ethereum? Right? I was like, okay, first of all, like, of course she's heard of Ethereum, but also, like, you know, I don't know. It's hard to imagine Ethereum as part of any solution for anything.
I'm the same on crypto, and it's interesting how many like libertarian anarchists are still like they love the digital enslavement thing. But the piece about that was, which speaks to your original point, was like it was the government that ruined the veggie diesel movement that was happening in California because they weren't getting their piece of the pie. And all of a sudden they inserted their big greedy mouths and were like, it is now illegal to put anything in your gas tank that we don't tax. But what's amazing is like, and I'm guessing him less than me, but it's like all the liberal climate crisis crazies who think I'm the Nazi, and it's like, but I was the one who was actually putting my money where my mouth was and like living this truth that your government destroyed.
Right. And this is how this plays. So to my point about government being the original Emergency Powers Act, the oil companies don't want people running their cars on the used French fry oil from the restaurant.
Correct.
Right? And so they go to the government and convince them to do this, that, you know, but yeah, we don't want to create the illusion of authoritarianism. So say you can do it, but we need our tax or did it or whatever it is. Right.
Right.
But the oil company wouldn't be able to stop you from doing the veggie oil without the government. So the people who wanted to have a rubber stamp to force people to buy their shit needed government to do that. Right. Just like you need the Emergency Powers Act to do the things that are unconstitutional. So like that was just the triad thing is the same, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the fundamental issue we're looking at in the quote unquote freedom movement, is that the people who have been moved to the front of the room all believe in government, all believe in an expert class, all believe in some authoritarians coming in to rescue us. Whereas those of us who are like, no, we don't need an expert class or authority figures to tell us what to do. We're the problem.
Well, and they all think it's okay to leave out information that would then make the situation and the topic more complex, more confusing, and require more nuance in order to be able to right? I mean, this is the whole, and I guess this is why, like, the thing is, like, the topics that I'm focused on right now are really, really confusing, right? And there is I can see why somebody, if something was brought to them that would take them a while to understand and they thought they already had their shit together, especially if you have a lot of money riding on it and you have things all ready to go, it would be tempting to say, like, you know, like, let's just leave that part out, right? But I'm actually trying to solve the puzzle, not just like have my movie do well or whatever it is, right?
Totally.
But anyone who thinks, like, if a person doesn't want to deal with something, there's a completely honorable way that you can handle it, right? There's this issue that I am not qualified to talk about and don't really want to, but it exists, and so you should check it out. Now on with my movie. But they never do that because they think it's okay. They think that this, like, laundering out of the parts that are inconvenient, like, I don't know what that is, that they just feel like, I can tell you the truth about everything else, but this one's inconvenient, so I'm just going to leave it out, right? And then they're still calling themselves a truth teller. If they said that, you know what, I'm a curator, or I'm an information selector, or I'm a story maker,
or I'm a shill,
right? You know, like, that's the problem. I mean, I think at this point, those people irritate me even more than the experts and the, you know, whatever, right?
They're the worst because it's dishonest. It's intellectually dishonest. You are curating information to try to sway the public in a certain direction because you think that you're right or that you know better, instead of trusting the public with all of the information and allowing us to all figure it out collectively ourselves.
And when they do that, I don't even think they understand the amount of confusion that they're truly creating. They think they're stopping confusion, right? But like this scenario that, like, I'm in right now, thanks to your interview with Andrew Kaufman and bringing up this possibility that DNA doesn't exist in the body, right? I'm super far down a rabbit hole now with, like, well, what actually is DNA? is DNA just a pattern that's vibrated into existence with the water and plasma in your body by sound temporarily that conveys information and then it's gone, which is a lot harder of a thing to imagine than just believing it's inside the body. But if it's true that it doesn't exist in the body and we can't actually find it, but that you can be this amorphous thing that comes and goes called DNA, and can be activated, deactivated, written, controlled, all this kind of stuff by sound, and people don't know that, then the world of confusion that could be created around them based on the fact that they're being controlled by something that they think is one place and it really isn't there at all is like way worse than having to like take a day, a week, or a month to study about whether this thing is real or not. And you could even come to a conclusion that's different than someone else's, but then you know the other possibility exists. So that if something shows up later that is evidence of that, then you're able to switch tracks pretty quickly and whatever. So they're actually sowing more confusion in reality. Maybe not in a
Which
person's
is why
Yeah.
they're put in those positions.
100%.
And they don't understand the larger game. They don't understand how they're being used. And their egos have gotten so fucking big and out of control that they think they're in those positions because they're a little bit better or a lot a bit better than the rest of us. And that arrogance is destroying the public discourse that we're still not allowed to have in any sort of cross-pollinated fashion. Like, I went to this Gene Keys thing a couple weeks ago, and Richard Rudd had just come from talking to Zach Bush, and he's giving his talk, and I love Richard Rudd so much, and he's like, well, Zach Bush said that 90% of our DNA exists in the belly, and I'm just like, how do we know that? I can't go along with that. There are too many holes in this. I need, like, stop, slow it down, roll it back. How does he know that? We need to have a conversation. So I watched myself for the rest of where that conversation was going, was like, I can't give you my suspension of disbelief because there are too many other questions. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, this is the whole, like, yeah. Here's the thing. You can inform, like, right now I'm obviously exploring the idea that DNA doesn't exist inside the body. But I'm not committed to that position, right? I now know that it could exist in the body or it could exist outside the body. The idea that it exists outside the body doesn't eliminate the possibility for me for now that it exists inside the body. But when people don't know there's a possibility that it doesn't exist inside the body, that's the only place they think it could exist, right? And so this is the whole, like, so even to your Richard Rudd thing, okay, let's just say that Zach Bush said that. We don't really know that Zach said that. We know Richard said that Zach said that.
Exactly.
Right. And maybe Richard doesn't have all the information to understand what Zach really said. And so he's making a mistake. But like, okay, let's say that Zach said that and that Richard reported what he said accurately, which doesn't mean it's right. In the belly is where we have a lot of fat, a lot of like fluids and food, all that stuff is in here. Right. So if what DNA is just like particles and fluid being vibrated into a position to like receive or transmit information and then it goes away, then 90% of DNA could happen in the belly, but still not really actually be there. And because he has not been enlightened, had the moment of questioning where DNA actually exists, if it does at all, he thinks it means that like, if he digs into the belly, he's going to find a lot of DNA there. Right. And so like, this is the thing. The more things we know, the more confusing everything gets, right? And when you said the thing about like these people who do this, they think they're better, that they're a little better than everyone else or better. Like, I actually think they have a huge complex. They actually think they feel not as good as everybody else.
Correct.
Right? And so they need to be the one to solve some problem and to fix something for the world, because then they can be the hero. It's and they hope that will deliver them from their misery.
Correct. It's that insecurity that renders them vulnerable to the arrogance that has them being put in these positions where they're supposed to know more. So I completely agree with you. And also to your point, and I think I might have told you this offline, stop me if I told you this online, but I live in New Mexico. We have 2 major nuke labs here. It's very common occurrence to meet someone, oh, I work at the lab. So I had a friend who was in town. We went to this place that serves this like very magical, cultured, like kind of Shaolin beverage, and we were sitting there talking to this man. He's like, oh, I'm new to New Mexico. I just got a job here. I said, you work at the labs? He said, yes. I said, do you work for the side of good or for the side of darkness? And he's like, it's kind of a mixed bag. And I said, fusion or fission? And the look on his face, like, he was so busted. Now, I don't know as much about it as you do. So I couldn't really push it that far. We've had a couple conversations, but that was like the end of the conversation. It was like, she is not safe to talk to.
Right. In none, if you listen to any of these political conversations, it's all fission reactor, right? It's all fission reactor, fission reactor, fission reactor. And like, just to be clear, like, there's nothing per se wrong with fission. It's just not the whole story. Like, fission happens naturally. So does fusion. But the focus on one to the exclusion of the other, when one is about breaking things down and the other is about putting them back together, right? Generally, fission happens and then fusion happens, right? Like, if it's Benjamin Balderson, I may be saying that wrong, but Benjamin Balderson, who's a lab alchemist, was explaining some of this to me, that like, the fission happens, and then if you proceed with certain things, then at a later point fusion happens, and then that's where things start to get really interesting and whatever. But this is such the play of the same power control freaks we're talking about, is they want to stop a process at a certain point, the point that allows them to like gain some of the benefits of something, but mostly be able to sort of create a closed system of control. Right. And that's always the thing. So I've not heard one person, when they're discussing nuclear, ever go to fusion reactor. Right. It's always fission reactor. They try and convince them that this is a safer one. This is a cleaner one. This is a da, 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 da. But they're only telling half of the story, which is like saying, that going through the whole COVID thing without mentioning. And then there's the issue of whether viruses can actually be isolated or not. You don't even have to say exist or don't exist. You can sound more scientific and whatever, and just say, then there's the issue of this. And you could just choose to say, that's out of my pay grade, but at least then you've informed people that like that exists. So these people don't have to talk about fusion if they're invested in a fission reactor, that they want their thing to go, but just not ever even acknowledging that this other thing exists is the same. So yeah.
Are we going to talk about, and I know you and I didn't talk about this today, but the Oliver Stone, Joe Rogan conversation, because
he also only said fission reactor. He didn't say fusion. He only said.
Well, and also I love how Oliver Stone is like.
Well, at least in that clip. I only saw the clip. Sorry. Go ahead.
But like, is the expert on again, like you have Oliver Stone telling us that nuclear is okay now because this, again, Hollywood insider has decided it. And obviously, like, they're really laying the groundwork for the larger nuke psyop. But I also loved how they both folded in their like dumping on Trump, that like standard fucking issue thing that Joe Rogan always does. But I was just wondering if we were going to talk about that at all.
Well, I only saw the clip, right? But yeah, I mean, Oliver Stone is another person that the establishment pretends to not like, but uses them as a specific kind of tool whenever they get the opportunity, right? He's like the faux opposition. He creates all the movies that makes people think he's an outsider and this, that, and the other thing. So I only can speak to the clip, which of course where he said fission, but I think he said fission in the clip, but not fusion.
But also the downplaying of Fukushima and how it really wasn't that big of a deal.
Right. Well, I mean, I think I mean, there's definitely out there that theory that like the whole radiation thing is like a psyop. Like the fear of radiation thing has always been a hoax or a psyop or nuclear or whatever. But he's not saying that. He's just pretending like that one's not a big deal because that's the most recent one that people go to say we shouldn't have nuclear. And now he's decided he wants nuclear. So if his position is that, nuclear is not really a problem at all, then he should be prepared to explain that, not just say how that scenario wasn't so bad. It was really just about this minor thing they were doing wrong or whatever it is, right? I can't speak intelligently enough about it because I didn't watch the whole episode because I just couldn't.
Do you know anyone who's had radiation treatment for cancer?
Yes. I'm not saying that I believe that. I'm just saying that there's a theory out there that there's a theory out there. Yes,
No,
my
I
grandfather.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what was his take on it?
What was whose take on it?
What was your dad's take on radiation therapy?
No, not my dad. I was going to say my grandfather had radiation therapy when he had cancer.
Were you able to talk to him about it?
I was like 6.
Okay, so when my friend Steven was dying of colon cancer, I got to spend a lot of time with him and talk to him about like every step of the way, because I'm very open to death and I'm very fascinated about that. And he said that when he had radiation, it was his biggest regret, and it was so clearly anti-life and this evil technology that should not exist on this planet.
So I think that from my understanding, and again, I don't hold a strong opinion on this because I don't know enough to have a strong opinion, but from the research that I've been doing based on the interest in nuclear fusion and DNA and all this kind of stuff, is that it's not just like, oh, radiation is bad or good. It depends on what is in the thing that's being radiated, and it depends on the type of like, so a person can radiate energy, right? Like radiation itself is not bad. It's what's being radiated and how it's being radiated. And I think that everybody has a different makeup of their blood, different elements, different levels. You know, they talk about the blue bloods, maybe have more copper. Like there's some people that have like ruthenium in their blood. Some people have all these different elements from periodic table.
Like
and
you.
Right. And the presence or absence of certain, or the levels at which some of these elements occur in your blood, would cause some people to have a bad reaction to some sort of radiating event in the environment, and others to be inert to it. Mm-hmm. So that whatever, maybe he has a high level of something in his blood based on his genetics, or based on something else, environmental or conditional, like he was using, that's what I'm saying. And then but then when you radiate that, the effect of that is different than it would be on somebody who does not have that inside of them. So this is one of these very complex kind of scenarios. Like you have, there are life forms that thrive in radiation, and other life forms that die in radiation. So this is where our actual lack of understanding of how things work, because we've been fed like the, Charlie Tuna version of reality or whatever it is, leads people to either think it's just fine and we shouldn't worry about it, or it's the most awful thing. Everyone just has these like cartoonishly polar opinions about certain things with very little actual understanding. Like if you knew that, like, okay, if you went into like an environment where there was a lot of a kind of energy that some would call like a radiant or a radiation type energy, and that in that environment their conditions are met for time travel for some people, and you wanted to time travel, you might be tempted to go in there. But if you knew that if you went into that environment while having eaten this or drank that or taken this anytime in the last 2 weeks, you wouldn't do it. You either wouldn't go in there if you had that, or you'd wait till you didn't. But the fact that we don't know those things, everybody's just wandering around everywhere all the time, not aware. Yeah. Right. And so then you can come down with these blankets. This is good, this is bad, and just everything becomes an either or equation, and everything, and we lose out on all of the amazing art and technology and science and metaphysical advancements that could be made if people actually knew things.
Yep. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, for sure, like that is definitely a thing that happens to people. One of the things that's crazy about these areas where they say there's radiation leaks, like in Chatsworth or in certain areas in Pennsylvania, different places, is that this is where a lot of people have like their paranormal or their transcendent or teleportation kind of events, and also where there's a lot of reports of cancer. And sometimes that's within the same family, right? Where like one kid is like, like if you watch that Dark series, some of the kids are fucking time traveling and their siblings or their parents are dying of cancer. They're in the same environment, but they're having a different response to whatever that stimulant is. And the complexity of the reality we live in is like fascinating and great. And like, it feels like that's the biggest thing, is that all the people who have been convinced that the most important thing to fight about is like what name someone, like what pronoun or this, that, or the other thing. Like they don't even know that a reality exists where things are that complex, right? They think that everything is, they can't handle it, right? So
this brings me to this piece, and I'm going to make it short because I know we've been talking for a while and we want to get to the other thing, but the spike protein thing that just happened, and it directly relates to what you and I were talking about. So I was in Boulder, which is the biggest city I've been in.
do we want to pause here and make the separation of the two segments and do that when we come back, or do you want to do this first and then go dark journalist and my other thing on the other side?
Either way, I'm happy to save it for second segment if you'd prefer.
Okay, let's do that because we've been going for about an hour and a half, and so we'll make another segment. So okay, so most of our content at this point is just for our supporters. And so the other half, which we're going to record right now, will be available to you probably sometime a week or 10 days after the first segment was. But if somehow some of this ever makes it to the public airways and you would like to hear the rest, the way that you do that is you go to wordspodcast.locals.com. And that's where you can find our material in its full and complete form all the time.
I have two announcements to make. One, I am partnering with Hotep Nation on my last ever pop propaganda course. If you are interested, get on the wait list now, dannycats.com/pop-prop course. We'll put the link in the comments, but it's gonna fill up. So if you're interested in registering your teen for that, do that. Number two is I'm going to be teaching another language of sovereign authority webinar. So stay tuned. If you're interested, shoot me an email through my website, dannycats.com. That's going to be happening sometime probably in the next few weeks.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. We'll see you on the other side.